Well, hello folks. Welcome to my second YouTube video I've ever made. This is actually a re-recording and a re-critiquing of the first YouTube video I ever made because the volume was just terrible on the voice. So I don't know what was going on there, so I had to figure that stuff out. Just to recap, this is a call. This title of this video that I'm going to critique is Sam Seder. It's called Sam Seder Debates Another Anarcho-Capitalist Caller. This guy Thomas from Los Angeles, he does a great job until about, I guess, halfway through the video. But despite doing a great job, Sam still likes to pivot around things. And because of that, he exposes some things in his philosophy I want to address. But more particularly, I want to address this one idea based on what Sam Seder's interpretation of 2008's crisis was. I want to address this one idea of the rating agencies that he believes is a free market outcome. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Okay, well, how does taxation being theft, why is that necessary to believe to be anti-war?
Because taxation is used to pay for war. The income tax first started to fund war.
Okay, and do they have to? I mean, they also pay for other things too, right? I mean, they don't have to. That's just a decision that we as a people allow to happen.
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily. Are you allowing the war or the stuff that's going on in Iran and Iraq right now to happen? Are you allowing that?
Well, no, but I'm also not allowing stock buybacks either, and that.
So this is the first pivot that Sam makes, but I do want to address that any appeals to authority, whether it be social contract theory or some kind of this is what we've agreed to as a society. The proper response is to go to these things that we know that both people are going to vehemently disagree with, such as bombing people in the Middle East. So I think this caller does a great job with that concept and with that, and I think he puts it back at him multiple times, and it's nice because it requires Sam to pivot away from certain things. Because for Sam, he's trying to play chess here, but he doesn't know what to do except move around and try to cloudy up the issue whenever he gets caught. So we'll see this multiple times, but I do want to emphasize at the end of this video that it leads to some very cynical beliefs about human nature. Alright, let's continue, and I'll try to not interrupt.
And that's happening. I mean,
what's wrong with stock buybacks?
What's wrong with stock buybacks? It is a manipulation of the stock market. It is I mean, to the extent that it used to be illegal, so much so 40 years ago, prior to 40 years ago.
I mean, without using appeals to authority like something being legal or illegal, what's immoral about a company buying pieces of their own company back?
What's immoral about it? Well, a company only. What is a company? What defines a company?
So notice he's pivoting away from the question, what is immoral about the stock buybacks, which is something he's already claimed. But when he's asked what's immoral about it, he's going to go down to this road of what's the definition of a company. They'll never get back to the actual issue because it's an unanswerable question for Sam. But let's continue.
A group of people, putting together and providing goods and services?
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No. What's a company? What do you need to be a company? To be incorporated?
Oh, well, that's a government enforced thing. I mean,
correct.
The idea of incorporation only exists as the legal shield of liability for the business owners to prevent them from, having their own assets seized in the case of bankruptcy or things like that.
Correct.
A corporation is inherently government agreement. Corporations are protected by government. You remove government, corporations don't exist. You just have people
Correct.
providing voluntary goods and services to the society.
Correct. And, of course, you wouldn't have a stock market, right? I mean, how would you enforce that?
So, keep in mind, the whole idea for Sam is that to be a company, you must be incorporated. That's just not true. I mean, he might not recognize it as a company, but a company is just people getting together to buy and sell goods. But he was trying to get to this appeals to authority thing because he's got to establish that force must rest with this coercive entity in which we are agreeing to as a society. That's his ultimate goal here. But he's not going to get satisfying answers from this. So he'll keep pivoting until he can try to find his way to get in there.
How would you enforce the contracts that were involved in a stock market?
Well, we would be getting into theoretical territory because something like this hasn't ever existed, but you could certainly provide, a dispute resolution organization, for example, if there is a demand.
What would be their source of authority?
The market.
The market would be the source of authority for a dispute resolution? How does that work? Like, you mean like for instance, we're going to give you, we're going to rate your bonds AAA. And why do we do that? Because we get our business from you. Everything will go perfectly. Don't worry about your derivative mortgage bonds because we've marked them AAA. That must mean they're great, right?
Well, that would work in the short term, certainly, but in the long term, you're going to lose trust as an organization, and people will no longer trust that rating agency to provide valid ratings.
Really?
And so a competitor can.
What are the name of the trading? What? Really? If that's the case, what are the name of the ratings agencies today? Are they any different than they were in 2006?
I couldn't tell you.
Well, I can tell you, they're not. And because your entire theory went out the window. Because they all rated.
Like, what does the government have to do with J.D. Power and Associates?
J.D. Power and Associates is not a bond rating agency. Listen, the bond rating. Listen. Let me tell you a little story because I have a feeling that you're probably not old enough to remember this. And I'm not appealing to authority. I'm just telling you. Prior to 2008, when we had a massive financial crisis that caused the immiseration of millions of people and the loss of houses, right? You'll recall all the rating agencies were rating these bonds that were being sold as AAA bonds because they were so sound, that they were so sure to pay off, and they were garbage.
What repercussions did they face for this fraud?
Virtually none.
Right, because the government is complicit in all of it.
The government, there was an attempt, the government, to decouple and to put restrictions on these agencies, but the corporate forces pushed back on it.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, Google Al Franken and bond rating agencies, and whether or not they should be able to, be paid by their clients.
I mean,
that's the system you're suggesting, right? You're suggesting that the market actually pay for the arbitrators of what they're doing, whether it's a bond rating agency or whether it's dispute resolution or whatnot. And I would posit to you that there's about a half a dozen ways in which that goes sideways. One is that they don't have a monopoly of force, therefore no one listens to them. Or they're being paid by the people they're supposed to regulate, and they don't regulate properly because it's not in their financial interest to do so.
Why are those the only two options? Why couldn't it be the...
So, let's recap what's happening here. The original question was about dispute resolution, which we can agree occurs now at the hand of the government. the government is the source of dispute resolution in the marketplace right now. So Sam Seder here, he has a problem because he thinks that, if it was a market, what would happen is people would be allowed to pay, for the clients that are, or I should say, the clients are allowed to get paid, or to pay for the rating agency that to get bonds rated. He's presuming that that's a free market outcome. But also, let's keep in mind, the government is the dispute resolver. Those three people, or those three companies, I should say, that were there before the crisis, were there after the crisis, and nobody really got in trouble for it. So it is the dispute resolver who failed in this whole thing. That's the government. It's not the market. It's the government. That's just the dispute resolver story. Just to establish where we are, he's upset because he doesn't think the market could provide a decent. He doesn't believe the market could provide a decent job of resolving disputes between companies, and yet it's the government that he needs as a consequence that is the one that failed so miserably. Now, we'll come back to the Al Franken thing in a second. But with, like, let's say the rating agencies, why are the issuers paying? Well, Sam is assuming that that's a free market, or Sam is assuming that that's a market outcome, that the issuers are the ones paying the rating agency to rate their bonds. But if we look at the history of S&P and Moody's and Fitch, which are the three largest rating agencies by far, if we were to look at them, we would look at their history, and we would see that prior to the 1970s, they were a subscription-based model, which is that investors paid these companies to go rate bonds. But something changed in the 70s. Now, if you look at their websites, I swear to you, I've Googled this. I cannot find a straight answer anywhere, but if you find one, please let me know. Please put it in the comments with source so I can look it up. But if you were to look at whenever Moody's, S&P, and Fitch switched over to the issuer pay model, you will only find the words in the 1970s. That's it. You won't find any other words that I can see. You will not find a specific year or anything. You will find in the 1970s. You won't find a specific year for any of the companies. But something significant happened, so I would bet in the 1970s something significant happened. And I would bet that if you were to wonder when they switched, you would find, or if you were to really peer in there, it would be around 1975. The reason being is that in the 1970s, the SEC started this recognition program called the Nationally Recognized Statistical Rating Organizations. That's the SEC did this, the government. They're the ones who did this. And basically, if an issuer wanted to issue bonds, well, they would have these ratings that were all subscription-based at the time. They would have these ratings. And the government would basically say that the only ones that are allowed are these recognized rating organizations. The only ones that are legitimate to be sold to the public are the ratings from these companies that are recognized by the SEC as nationally recognized statistical rating organizations. You can look this up. But let's think through the logic there about what would happen there. Well, so, first of all, the SEC is a bureaucratic mess. It even was in the 70s as well, because all government is a bureaucratic mess. This is why you become an anarcho-capitalist, is because you recognize this over time. It takes time to enter the market, or to get the approval of the government for your work. So, while new competitors might be trying to enter the market to become a rating organization, well, you have Moody's, S&P, and Fitch who have been there for 40-something years. And they've already got approval from Washington. That means that they know politicians as well. because they were already considered the masters of capital as it was. I mean, they were already a dominant force. But the logic would be, what would be good business would be, oh, you've got this rating now? Well, how about you go put the regulations in place to keep out the competition. And what ultimately happens is you make the bar to entry higher for these other companies, so they just don't enter the market anymore because they can't. They don't have the funds, and they don't have the willpower to do so. And so what ended up happening was, in the 1970s, when that got passed, there were like 10 major rating organizations, something like that. You can find them on Wikipedia, I believe. Then by the 1990s, that number dropped to 6. There were more consolidations and bankruptcies as well for these organizations. And then that number dropped to pretty much 3. Again, this all started with the switch over to the nationally recognized statistical rating organizations around the exact same time that the SEC started issuing these letters about who is approved and who isn't. But it switched to 3. And because you've got these letters of approval, well, you also have the strength to say, well, if you want to have your bonds issued to the public, you better start paying us. So yeah, Moody's and S&P and Fitch, they switched over to this issuer pay model, which is, I can guarantee you, much more profitable for them if they can charge 1% of your bonds versus some investors who will take your rating and then they'll make all the investments that they need, and you've only issued like 1 magazine. That was actually the fear of that they used to promote this idea that that they needed to switch models in the first place. It was because of the photocopier and all that ratings it would become so cheap it would destroy their profit model. So, the presumption that Sam Cedars has is that this is a market outcome, that the issuer pay model is a market outcome. It's just not. But it's also not true that people wouldn't be willing to rate the bonds if, like, let's say that there wasn't that protection in place. I guarantee you that that's where he would go, because that's where most left-wing people would go. Is we need these regulations to kind of, protect these markets. That way we know that they're doing a good job. Because we want the best people doing it, don't we? But when you think about what a rating agency is, well, it's no different than a financial analyst, which is what I am. What is a financial analyst? Well, they are analysts who look at portfolios of investments for their clients, their investor. So they look at a portfolio of investments for their investor. They tell the investor which ones are the best, and they give a rating to them called, NPV, IRR, whatever you want to call it, whatever metric you want to use. It's basically the same concept. But guess what? The salary you're paid as a financial analyst from the organization that's trying to make these investments, that's called a subscription-based model. That's called an investor pays model. So there is a market for it, at least on the individual financial analyst perspective. Why wouldn't there be for bonds? They're just bonds. It's not that complicated. Despite what you might hear, yeah, it's smarter than your Washington bureaucrat, but it is not that complicated for an industry professional. It's just not. It's just math. Anyway, that's really the issue I wanted to address there, is Sam's presumption that this is a market outcome, because it's not. But also I want to just kind of show you that the investor pay model is ubiquitous in every other industry except the bond rating one. And that the issuer pay model became dominant in the 1970s. That's just what I wanted to explain. It became the dominant one, and it led to consolidation and mergers, and it led to the big 3. which are the same ones that are ingrained in Washington. Because that's the smart move. Whenever you have government's coercive power, the monopoly of force is what failed you. It is his dispute resolving, or it is Sam Seder's government's dispute resolving power that failed people. This is why you become an ANCAP. But let's continue, because it does, this same story gets a little worse, and I want to address the philosophy behind Sam Seder's, what would you say, opinions and presuppositions about human nature, because I think it's very telling. We're going to address this multiple times in different videos. So let's continue.
That me as an investor, I hire a completely independent rating agency to look at somebody's books before I make an investment.
Oh, you can have an auditor do that, and then I can have an auditor do that. But what if that company also?
Please bear with me. We're going to go through this section just a little bit, not too much. It's at the end of the section. That's whenever we can start to address the philosophy for a short minute.
Excuse me, let me finish. What agency would you, let's just do it, hypothetical, ABC Accounting, right? Well, guess what, dude? I'm a company. You're just an investor. I hire ABC Accounting to do my books. Bingo!
But why is ABC the only company? I mean, in a free market, there'd be ABC, there'd be DEF, there'd be GHI, there'd be JKL.
Do they have to disclose to you who their other clients are?
I mean, if they want my business, then they would be wise to disclose all
What
of
if
that
they
stuff.
don't? How would you know?
Well, let me finish now. The companies that want my business would be as open as possible. They would have open books and say, these are our clients, this is who we pay for. Like, if they want my money as an investor, that's who I'm going to go with.
I got news for you. Me as a major corporation, I'm not going to hire ABC auditing if they're going to tell you who that they represent me. I'd like a little client privilege. I would like a little bit of.
Be the one that to go to.
I mean, and how do you know that they're actually? Are you saying there has to be a governmental law that they have to be transparent, or do you just guess that they're being transparent?
The market demands that they be transparent, and so if that is a market demand, then companies that want to make money.
What is the market? What do you mean the market demands? What does that mean? The market demands.
Market demand means that's what investors want. You're the market. I'm the market. Everybody is the market. Combined, we become the market. If the market wants, meaning you, me, any investor wants to invest in a company, then you can pick
how does the market know that you're being? How does the market know that?
What? Go ahead.
How does the market, you, me, everybody? How do we know that? How do we know the company's telling us who all their clients are? They have no legal obligation to do so, correct?
Trust is huge. You know, how do you know that when you buy a package from Amazon, it's going to come delivered to your?
Okay, before we get to this last point, this is where it gets telling. Let's turn this question back around for a second. His question is, how do you know that the market, or that they're being transparent? Is there a law, a governmental law that says that they must be transparent? Well, here's the deal. How do you know that Moody's and Fitch and S&P were being transparent? Was there a governmental law that said that they must be transparent? Well, yeah. Clearly, there was a law that said that they must be giving safe ratings. But you don't know that. It still failed. It was the dispute resolver. He's mad at the market for what the government failed to do. It's sad, really. But I do want to address this other point, and that is the assumption, which I think, once a guy pivots so many times, like Sam Seder did here, it's difficult to stay on task, because there are a lot of questions. But to bring this back into focus, I would not make the assumption that the market demands transparency. The market demands good reputation. That's what you could say about the market. I don't know that means that a company must be transparent. For all I know, that could mean that the company just needs to have a history of giving good ratings. And I can also guarantee you that a company like a bond issuer is not going to willingly pay $1 billion of its face value of its bonds to a rating organization if people are willing to pay $1 million, aggregated out to say 1,000 people. I don't know, it's aggregated is a bad word, but divided up into 1,000 people. You pay $1,000 a year, $1 million, they'll go rate bonds for you. The bond issuer is not going to pay $1 billion in fees to do that. It's just not going to happen. It would make no sense to, unless you're really just trying to game the system. And that would only work for a very short while. And the company that they must pay would probably not have a very good reputation in history, or a reputation at all. Not to mention, it must be it would have to agree with the competitive scrutiny. Like, so if you have an organization who's giving a AAA rating to these bonds that everybody else that has a good history is giving a B rating to, you're not going to trust that organization. You're not going to say that they go with the market. They're going to have their own market beta on their ratings. Anyway, that's a short addressing of that point. Here's the last bit, and this is where we get into Sam Seder's cynicism about human philosophy, or human nature, the philosophy of human nature.
Your house, and they're just going to keep the money. That's how they stay in business long term.
Well, it's also illegal for them to do that.
It's good for them to build up trust with the community and have their ratings actually be worth something and not dog shit like government ratings.
Right. So according to you, that companies never do stuff that, like, for instance, like, you would never see a situation where, I don't know, somebody says, hey, this new form of opioids is not addictive, so you should prescribe it.
Well, I mean, you'd have to be.
So this is where the caller is finally, he kind of lost it with Sam Seder's pivoting. This is where I want to address his philosophy of human nature, which is Sam Seder's answer to why does Jeff Bezos deliver your packages to your door. Well, the caller's answer is that it's good for his business to have your reputation of delivering packages on time and to make sure your packages get to you. Sam Seder's answer is, well, it's illegal for him not to do so. That is a stupid answer, for one, and it's incredibly cynical. To believe that means you have to believe that most people are not inherently good, or at least want to be good. That goes against Adam Smith, that's for sure. Man desires first to be loved and to be lovely. So to have this opinion that Jeff Bezos' only reason for delivering your packages to your door is because it's illegal not to, that's just a ridiculous argument. He wouldn't be a billionaire if he early on started, not delivering packages to your door. And you wouldn't buy from Amazon anymore. Because I guarantee you that Walmart would just be itching to fulfill your order. And then Target and I don't know who else, Kroger, Alibaba, they would all be itching to fulfill your order. It makes no sense. Now, Sam Seder then, he's finally had enough, and he's kind of going to his last bit here. This is why he says it so. This is why he says it so cynically. Is according to you, a company would never, subscribe a bad opioid. Well, the caller's answer was never that they would never do or engage in business practice. In fact, this is why you become an ANCAP, is because you recognize there are just some bad people out there, or some bad actors. Not all of them. The majority of people want to be good. But there are some bad actors out there. That's just a fact of life. And so you become an ANCAP because you think that the best way to minimize their impact on society is to not give them a coercive entity. that allows them to continue raiding after a crisis. But to answer the question quickly about whether or not pharmaceuticals are free markets or are a free market industry, well, no, they hide behind patent laws. They have a whole supply chain that's built around patent law. So it's an inflated cost because it's built behind government regulation. It's built behind government protection. So they have this whole inflated industry of salaries and investment costs, all because of this. And unfortunately, the outcome is that people are prescribed opioids whenever weed would probably do just fine for a lot of people. Anyway, the question on pharmaceuticals, perhaps that's for another time. I don't want to make this video too long. I hope you enjoy. If you did, please subscribe and like it. If you didn't, please leave it in the comments about why. I'll try to address your questions as you want me to. All right, take care.